I would like every person taking the floor to introduce themselves. Please limit your intervention to about 2 to 3 minutes in order to allow as many people as possible to participate and give sufficient time for the panelists to answer. Questions? You're speechless. As I see.
My name is Eric Khan and I'm from Columbia University. And my question is, since there is such a shortage in the supply of organs, what do you think is the best way to deal with that shortage?
Apparently there's a worldwide shortage of microphones too. So I think I would say 3 things. One, in the short run, we need to encourage legitimate cadaver systems to be formed around the world. That would help. I do think that the defaulted donation approach has some merit. I've been arguing for it in the U.S. futilely for about 30 years, but other places may want to go to such a system. I think in the longer run, regenerative medicine is the answer. You know, the truth of it is, and I say this as a student of transplant for a long time, taking organs out of dead people and pouring immunosuppression into the recipient to keep it going is not the most elegant medicine we've got. It would be nice to repair the body. So the fight about stem cell funding here, the fight about pushing stem cell research overseas is connected here. And I think that's where you got to push longer term.
There's been a couple of relatively, but they're at the margins, some relatively games, I don't mean that pejoratively, play. Columbia, the kidney group has led in the matching. I'm prepared to give to you, but I'm not prepared to give to a stranger, but it turns out that I'm incompatible with you. But out there is a stranger who is compatible with you, and I happen to be compatible with his. I mean, you know, they've been playing these, 4, 5, 6 times removed. So people are getting a little bit more imaginative about this. I think Art is right in terms of elegant, it's not. So you're probably going to have to deal with short term and long term. At some point, maybe medicine will get to the point where we have alternatives to transplant. In the short run, be as imaginative as you can be in terms of getting organs.
Just to add to that, I'm very optimistic about the potential of what we can call pair donation. And in recent weeks, I'm sorry I forget his name, but a scientist has been awarded a Nobel Prize based on some of progression in this direction of pair donation. So I think that there's an untapped or undertapped resource in that looks quite promising.
I think I agree with the regenerative medicine, especially using nanomaterials. There is a lot of research which has done. More specifically, I have seen with my own self using stem cell taken from genitals, which was done on mice. A herniated backbone was fairly quickly fixed. So regenerative medicine, just by way of one example, has lots of potential, and I think that perhaps may be a solution for reducing the organ donation or organ trafficking.
But it hasn't gotten us terribly far. The effort to get the quote artificial heart, well, we have the quote artificial kidney, but of course it's dialysis. But we don't seem to have made a lot of progress over the last decade or two in terms of artificial organs.
In fact, ironically, what's happened is the one area that's had significant artificial organ breakthrough is the heart, but it's the left ventricular assist device, which has only opened up more people to get transplants. So it's a waiting or a holding kind of, and it's a destination therapy. You're going to die with it or get a transplant. So ironic.
The only other grim statement would be if you watch what happens when people get artificial hips, you're a little anxious about what will happen when they get artificial kidneys.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm with the Mission of Egypt here in New York. credit to the UN, and it was actually interesting to listen to the different presentations that were given. And if I may start with quoting Dr. Rothman, "Give me data rather than rumors," and that's how I'd like to start my intervention. It's more of a comment, not a question. Several of the presenters referred to cases that were in Egypt, which was back in the 1980s and 1990s, where we had a serious problem with the issue of organ trafficking, in particular with a population that has, on average, 35% kidney failure ratio. However, the current state, and I'm referring particularly to the case which was referred to as Sudanese asylums, which was over 6 or 7 years ago, where we had 3 documented cases of organ trafficking in that particular situation. We had over 18,000 Sudanese asylum seekers in Cairo. And that case was documented, these cases were documented with the Office of the High Commission for Refugees. National investigations were carried out, and further than that, the national government provided rehabilitation services, including psychological and medical services, to the Sudanese victims until the situation was legally resolved with the Office of the High Commissioner. So my question is, or let me say my comment is, that I would have appreciated to listen to concrete data and facts rather than just excerpts from certain historical cases. Some of them are over 6 to 15 years ago, including as well the case of the tunnels in Palestine. The Sawarki family has been investigated, and most of its members have been arrested, those who are living in Egypt, for that. So this case has been a historical case. Now, the data on the ground right now, and the situation right now, we would consider as a government official working in the UN and combating human trafficking, recent data would be more valuable to our efforts at the national level, regional, and global level within the United Nations in combating this phenomenon. Thank you.
I am so pleased to respond. Thank you for that thoughtful question. We at the COFS Egypt office have documented cases in recent years and recent weeks of ongoing abuses of Sudanese and others, and we've corroborated the evidence in an evidence-based report that's on our website. I invite you can see it from our homepage, cofs.org. We've corroborated the evidence of testimonies, medical follow-up that we give as an outreach service that also serves as evidence that a kidney has been removed, with witnesses, and I invite you to look at the evidence. The evidence, we identified 44 cases, gave in-depth interviews. We have narratives and video clips on our website with the reports. Major medical professionals who in recent weeks have come to this country have admitted to this going on by their colleagues. I don't know of the cases that have been in the courts, but fortunately this report has produced significant response from the UNHCR and and State Department and other officials that has been unprecedented. One of the best, most encouraging pieces is that Egypt is one of the few countries that has a trafficking law that includes organs for removal. That has never been used yet for that purpose. So the abuses are ongoing. We have identified neighborhoods where there's concentrations of Sudanese who have showed their kidney scars from organ removals, and the majority of them are Darfur who have fled genocide, as I mentioned. So we do have the evidence. We are not outdated anymore, and so I just invite you to look at that. And what we really need is better response to it. And I thank you though, because I agree with you that we need to have more evidence-based findings. We need better third-party investigations. I do think that there's increasingly or important concerns coming out of the Sinai of allegations that are getting a lot of attention that are not necessarily well-grounded yet, but we think that are serious allegations that do demand third-party investigations. I remain skeptical, and because I've dissected rumors for so many years now from facts, and so I can understand how things get misrepresented, but I've also been shocked that in many years I hear, as many say, that denial is more than a river in Egypt, that it's very hard for us to confront this issue. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions actually. One is, why is it so difficult to get data? You know, why has been this such a difficult matter? And you know, I imagine that Dr. Roman has something to say about this, maybe your concerns about the lack of evidence on this issue. So that's one question. The other one is, this cannot happen without the cooperation of doctors. So what is, I mean, clearly they are being complicit on these, with this crime, if it is, the crime is happening as it seems to be the case. So what is being done about that?
Great. The dialogue we just heard a moment ago, of course, is an example of the difficulty of the data. But your comment about the physician. I think there's a sex trafficking, which we've heard a lot about tonight, seems to me, and I am not an expert in this, sex trafficking seems to me a much easier phenomena to, quote, get away with than organ trafficking. Okay, so, you know, you get a girl, a bedroom, house of prostitution, bordello, what have you. The minute the involvement can be, so to speak, he who you know captures the girl, supplies the bedroom, and then the guy comes. It's a trio, okay? And you can get away with a lot when there are three involved. I'm using this number obviously metaphorically. But take the kidney. Not only does the doctor have to be in, I mean, you know, first of all, there's the transport issue, right? Let's start at the very basic. First of all, there's the removal issue. So, I mean, you know, it's all terrific that you've kidnapped, et cetera, or that she's got you in this bathtub of ice. Who took the organ, and who took the organ in a way that renders it absolutely transplantable? This is no simple, obviously, everybody in this room knows. This is very, very difficult. Then you've got the preservative, okay? So you got and where did you do it? In the hotel room like that movie? I mean, you know, it's complicated as you start. Then you got to go the next step, you know. Not only do you need a physician, you need a sterile operating room, you need an anesthesiologist, you'll need a couple of, you know, nurse attenders. It's not a whorehouse. And it gets so complicated that, in fact, one would think whistleblowers here, there, etc. Now, nobody should ever think, and I don't believe anybody in this room does think, that the practice of, you know, organ trafficking doesn't go on. Of course it goes on. But you've got to, it's so, I mean, our fourth speaker had a figure up there, what, $32 billion? Where did it come from? How does he know? Because again, now look, you know, how do you know what goes on in the drug trade? But I'm delighted that you raised this question, because a traffic in organs is far more complicated, I believe, than a traffic in labor or a traffic in sex. Mark?
If I can reply, we find the most challenging piece of getting data is that there's not protection mechanisms. People are afraid to talk. People on all levels. We've just developed a tool for collecting reports called Expose and Disrupt Organ Trafficking. XDOT will release it in a few months. As a way to collect any information that we can. Of course, validity will be a question for all kinds of mechanisms or tools like this. However, we've had so many pieces of information that have been fragmented about this for so many years that if at least we can collect it and better analyze it, I think it will serve a lot of purpose to put pieces better together.
My only comment on, I think these answers are great, but my only additional remark is I do think holding people accountable for the provenance or the source of organs on the physician end is crucial. We flagged it in the UN report. In the cadaver organ transplant system in Europe and the US, I don't think there's very much in the way of trafficking because people know where the organs come from and there's a whole series of checkpoints. In living organ donation, there's definitely been trafficking in the US because you open the door, as David said, they don't want to be detectives, the organ's here, we don't ask questions, nobody's pushing us. So if you're going to have living systems, you've got to toughen up the requirements to prove, or at least hold liable, the people who install those organs. Absolutely.
Good evening. I'm the Ambassador of Albania to the United Nations, and I was very pleased to be here and to hear these wonderful presentations by very knowledgeable persons, and I learned a lot. I have one comment for you, Dr. Rasishta. I was very surprised to see what you presented about the so easily established link between KLA, the Kosovo Liberation Army, and Al-Qaeda. You're the very first person that I have heard in 20 years to establish that link. And you say that your sources are unclassified, and you quoted a lot, Wikipedia or one newspaper, Washington Times. I would say that Wikipedia is really a wonderful mine of information, but that's not reliable. My kids are not allowed to quote Wikipedia in their research, and they are in public school in New York City. So I would really very respectfully but very strongly question what you said about this link between KLA and Al-Qaeda, and you certainly know what happened in the 90s, that this country and many other countries in Europe engaged a war, the first that NATO engaged in Europe for what was happening at the time. I don't want to really enter into any political discussion, but this link that you established is absolutely wrong, and I would not have liked this audience to live with that remark. Thank you.
I understand, as I mentioned, that some of these examples came from literature. I'm not privileged to provide some of the information which is ongoing and which we do not want to put in unclassified domain. So the idea of taking this information from the literature, again, they are corroborated from different sources. They are not coming from one single source, not coming from just Wikipedia alone, but these are coming from different sources. But idea was more philosophical to show that indeed that there is some linkage and one can extrapolate more, but there is a whole lot more, which obviously, as I mentioned, we are not privileged to put that information out in public domain.
My name is Feodor Starcic. I'm Ambassador of Serbia to the United Nations. A number of speakers mentioned the element of crime committed in the trade of organs. And indeed, in connection with this, it is extremely important not to allow impunity to rule that area. We fight in the UN against impunity for all crimes, all violations of human rights mentioned, committed in the world, etc. So we must fight impunity in this area as well. Professor Kaplan mentioned the highly unacceptable practice of killing prisoners in certain countries. Killing prisoners in certain countries for the purpose of utilizing their organs. The even more nefarious practice is to actually capture, take people, hunt them like a cattle for the purpose of killing them and taking their organs. This is unfortunately what happened to more than 300 of unfortunate people from my country in 1999. They disappeared, having been captured by the KLA mentioned, never to be heard of again. The mission of UN in Kosovo in 2004 came upon certain clues of what had happened to them, and even sent certain material proofs to the court for former Yugoslavia. The court kept these material proofs, and unlike any court in living memory, decided in 2008 or 9 to burn them. They supposedly presented, the explanation given to me was, they posed health hazard. In any event, this event captured the attention of the Council of Europe, which named the investigator, Mr. Dick Marty, who devoted 2 years to this issue, and finally presented a report, a frightening piece of work, in January 2011. For the moment, these atrocious crimes are investigated by the European Rule of Law Mission in Kosovo, EOLEX. So far, without any concrete results. Many people in my country think that the purpose of that investigation is to sweep things back under the carpet. I hope that this is not going to happen, because the victims cry for truth. And I'm sure you know this case, and I wanted to illustrate with this case the need to fight impunity in the area of organ trafficking. Thank you.
I'm familiar with the situation you describe, and I know that there have been investigations back and forth, and we're in some sense a prisoner to our politics in terms of being able to find the truth. What I will tell you is this: when we looked at it at the UN in the report that we did, and we knew about the case you were describing, I certainly hadn't heard any connection between certain terrorist organizations and Calais, but we had many people coming with many allegations. At the end of the day, I think it is important to get the facts, important to get the truth. The victims deserve it, they merit it. That's justice that we have to render. We have to go clear-eyed to what can happen in very nasty circumstances, whether it's Syria today or other conflict zones or refugees who are exploited. But I'll try to shift the focus back. I remember talking with some of my co-authors, and we kept saying, well, in this report, are we going to try and name and shame, or are we going to look for policies that would prevent reoccurrence? And so while the report never really, that we did in 2009, never really took a stance on these cases, we knew about them, we heard them, in a certain sense we were willing to credit without even further argument. Moving forward, if we don't establish the responsibility of the transplant teams who use the organs, accountability and liability, I don't think we're going to be able to work back to secure justice. So when I said, if we're going to have living donation, we need to have a system that attempts to hold people accountable who do the surgery, because they are the moral hotspot. That's where you can intervene and stop this kind of thing. It doesn't answer your plea that the story be told or the facts. And I'm not against it. I'm just saying, from an ethics and policy point of view, given the politics of what goes on behind all this, you've got to go to the switches to see what you can turn off. And so my suggestion is that where we can pull together is to try and get that accountability established and liability for the people who use trafficked organs.
Quickly, also thank you for that. And we have to look, I think, to the other, the advancement of other anti-human trafficking initiatives that have been based on the notorious 3 Ps of prevention, protection, and prosecution. And one of the recommendations we've also made is to, by including the removal of organs in the TVPA, the domestic law in this country, the anti-human trafficking law in this country, would thus mandate the State Department's TIP report to hold countries accountable and rank them. In all of its strengths and weaknesses, it's been an important, that TIP report has been an important tool to assess every country and their responses to any form of trafficking, now thus far for sex and labor, but to be able to include that organs piece in it would be another way to assess countries and hold them accountable to respond by getting that ranking.
At least when we were looking at this Council of Europe, United Nations, we did call upon international police agencies, Interpol, and police agencies to take this problem of trafficking more seriously. The truth is it wasn't a high priority, so that's always been a difficulty in the area too, about where are the facts. Child trafficking, yes, people pay attention. Obviously, illegal weapons, people pay attention. This just wasn't a top priority. We did talk to some police officials and they said, we haven't really looked at this that much. So you have to keep the pressure on there to make sure that the monitoring and the investigations, both backwards and forwards, go forward too.
My name is Neelan Fernandez. I'm a producer for NTD. I'm currently producing a video series on forced organ harvesting in China. You can search for it on YouTube, Killed for Organs, China's Secret State Transplant Business. Please share it as widely as possible. It's geared to help raise awareness about this crime against humanity. I remember some years ago in Prague, I went to a transplant congress, and it was on organ trafficking, and the panelists asked the audience, they were all doctors, how many of you know of patients who've gone to other countries to get an organ? And there were about 400 people in the audience. About 1/3 of the doctors raised their hand. There's several steps that can be taken to help stop organ trafficking around not only China, where it's most rampant, where independent investigators have estimated over 41,000 people being killed in just 5 years, and I believe it's still going on. What steps can the medical community, international community take together to help stop this practice, this gruesome practice, not only in China, but where it's most rampant right now, but also prevent it from happening in all other countries?
Well, let me just say one word about China. And I want to preface this by saying this sounds a little perhaps overly polite, but China is a nation greatly to be admired. It has deep ethical and cultural traditions. Its entry into the world of science and technology is remarkable. I have many connections into the Chinese medical and scientific communities with great respect for their views on many moral matters. They don't often need to be lectured by neophyte countries that have been around a while. That all said, it does seem to me that in the area of trying to get the attention of the officials of China to stop that practice there, the boycott ideas, the calling out by the scientific community. In fact, Deborah showed me something which I forgot to mention. There was a journal, what was it, yesterday? A couple days ago, that just retracted organs from Chinese transplant practice because of abusing prisoners. Not only were they not taking them, they started to pull them back. You may say, well, journalists and scientists. I think to enter into the international community and hold the standing that China rightly deserves, it is very sensitive to these responses. I know it because I hear it. I know what this impact is of this kind of pressure being brought to say you're going to be a pariah in this area if you don't sort of get on board what the international community deems as minimal standards for acquiring organs. The only other comment I make about combating this type of practice is that I think there is an opportunity for the State Department and governments around the world to say or do more. We did just put in, some of you know there's a citizen petition thing in the United States where you can get signatures together and demand a response from the government. We've had them about things like should Texas stay as part of the United States so that everything is lofty, but we did one on should the State Department respond to the practice of killing of prisoners for organs in China. We got the signatures. I think we got 40,000 last time I looked. We initiated it, and I'm waiting to see what the response will be. These things matter in the international community.
The Chinese, as Art properly said, are among the very heaviest users of capital punishment. Okay, the 5,000 figure is probably an underestimate, because the Amnesty International gathered that figure by reading published reports. So it could be still higher. Now, question, and I don't mean to indulge in sophistry, question. They are executing 5,000 to 10,000 people a year, okay? Now, does that, okay, and they are, in some number of cases, taking organs. More at the local level than at the national level, because the hospitals are very into the income from this procedure, and the hospitals are not well supported by the central government. Are they, but I think we've got to get the language right. Are they killing people for their organs, or are they executing people and taking their organs? Now, I don't know that that's sophistry to make that distinction. I believe that their capital punishment rates are so extraordinary, and you want to talk about capital punishment as barbaric pleas, but for the most part it would appear that they are executing as they would have executed, and then using the organ. Then you can start playing these games, as some of my associates do. You know, somebody is kept alive because we got a donor, we got a would-be recipient, so we don't know if life on death row is shorter or longer. I mean, you know, you can start to play those games. And by the way, the Chinese are not the only ones.
We call those people the Congress.
Yeah, Congress. Some years ago, I was in Taiwan, where where it was quite open that the Taiwanese were using organs from executed prisoners. And they were quite defensive of it, including in religious terms. So a transplant surgeon said to me, this is his last chance to make it back. And he wasn't kidding. I mean, he wasn't kidding. So the executed prisoner organ thing is not quite the same as lining them up and taking their organs. And yet, I understand.
Global Bioethics Initiative intends to follow up with specific proposals for future research, for policy development, including a possible global convention against organ trafficking. But that can be done only in collaboration with some other organizations, with the academia, including international organizations such as the UN. And thank you very much for this wonderful panel discussion. Round of applause, please, for our panelists.